Hello. So this video is going to be, it is a Pixar movie, and I do believe that it did get a theatrical release. And I'm going to be talking about Planes, which came out in 2011. It is kind of a spin-off to like Cars and Cars 2 and Cars 3 because the two Planes movies, Planes and then Planes Fire and Rescue, they do take place within the same world as Cars. Because I know that some of the shorts that Mater has done, like Mater's Tall Tales, like those ones that Pixar has done, there's one that is called like Air Mater or whatever that involves Mater learning how to fly. And then they kind of use that as like a jumping off point to do like the Planes movies. I've actually only seen the movies. I think watching Planes for this viewing, for this review, I think was like maybe only the second or the third time that I've actually seen the Planes movies, because when they first came out, during the time frame when like the Planes movies came out, and during that time frame in like the early 2010s, I was like, it's not that I didn't watch Pixar movies, it's just we didn't go see them in theaters as much during that time frame, just because of scheduling and everything like that with my dad, and we didn't have the time to go to see the movies as much. But now we definitely go and see them very regularly. Pixar, Marvel, Disney, Harry Potter, take your pick. And of course, the Planes takes place within the same world as, Disney Pixar's Cars movies, which is very nice. So that's fun. And so there's like references to like, there's some of the characters that pop up in both of them. Nothing major. That's mostly like some of the TV personalities that pop up in both of them. Like Lightning McQueen does not pop up in the Planes movies unless he's like in the background or something like that. That would be fun, but he doesn't really pop up in them as far as I'm aware. Like a cameo, if he's in them at all. Same thing with like Mater. And I can actually connect this back to Nebraska, because the scene in the movie takes place in Nebraska, and I'll get to that. But in Nebraska, between Lincoln and Omaha, we have this place that is called the SAC Museum, or the Strategic Air and Space Museum. And at some point, I'll probably do like a whole video about that at some point way down the line. But it's a air and space museum that is filled with all of these different airplanes, and there's rockets there, and there's, B-52 bombers and like all these other like great old planes that, like early planes, and then planes from like World War I and World War II, and like up through, like modern planes and stuff like that. And like there's rockets there too. There's like a whole section that's about like space travel in the museum and everything. And like there's hangars that are just filled with these planes that have been like, meticulously reconstructed. And, I don't know if they're in like 100% usable condition, but they're in amazing condition, and it's just fun to like walk around and look at them. And I've been going there I've been going there since I was a kid. And like the first plane that you see when you walk into the building is like the giant black jet plane that I can never remember what it's called, but it's just like this sleek black jet plane that like you walk into the museum and it's just staring directly at you, suspended in the air. And I'll try to put a picture of it in here if I can find one. And, it's this like really high-tech plane that they had, jet plane that had been made by the U.S. military, and like it was used for like surveillance missions and everything like that. And it's just fun going on tours through this thing. So it's like there's this connection there to planes and such like that I've, kind of had around me. I personally have not flown that much. I've flown like when I was a kid. My parents took us down to Florida, and then like I've flown out to California when I was in middle school, but that's like the only times that I've ever been on a plane. Yeah. So into the movie itself. So the movie kind of starts out with like a dream sequence. The star of the movie is Dusty Crop Hopper, who is this crop duster airplane that's from like the Midwest. And he is, he's got like these big dreams of being a flyer, like this, global flyer and everything like that. Like he spent his whole life just being like, going back and forth over the same fields, being a crop duster. And, he's just, it's not that he doesn't enjoy his job. It's just he states in the movie at some point that he's just like, I've flown back and forth, in a straight line over fields my entire life. I've gone thousands of miles and I've gone nowhere. And, he's from like this little tiny town that's called Propwash Junction. And the movie kind of starts out with like this dream sequence where he's like dreaming about, flying and racing against these, like these big, these like, military grade, like jet engine planes. And like dreaming about like leaving them in the dust. And of course, that's not the case. He's a, crop duster airplane and everything like that. And, so he's got these big dreams of being a racer. Doesn't mean that he, necessarily has to be like the best, but he wants to be a racer. He wants to prove that being a crop duster, being built to be a crop duster does not mean that you cannot dream of bigger and better things. So it's kind of like the, the underdog type of story, which I enjoy. A little, not quite the Lightning McQueen underdog, which Lightning wasn't really like the underdog, but he was like, the rookie thing with Dusty. He is literally this, underdog character. We meet his boss, who's like this other crop duster that's called Leadbottom, and he's very much like an old plane that's like set in his ways, doesn't really care that much about, like doesn't understand why Dusty wants to do anything else. And then of course, like within his town that, Dusty lives in, he has like his friend Chug, who is this like, fuel truck. And, like they practice flying together. Like as soon as Dusty is, off work from being the crop duster, he goes and he does these different, aerial maneuvers and racing maneuvers and stuff like that. And like Chug has like a book that's called Air Racing for Dummies, which is just funny. And he's like giving Dusty, different tips and everything like that in regards to like, well, try this, do that, go faster, like try this. And like they use like the obstacle course that they've kind of designed of like the trees and everything like that. The trees and the plains and everything, the crop fields and such around, Propwash Junction, because it's like this little tiny like farm town area, which we've got a lot of these in Nebraska. We drove by so many of them during our trip across the state. So that's fun. And when, we also meet Dusty's mechanic, who's like the town mechanic that is this little forklift called Dottie, and she's adorable. And, she kind of like rails against Dusty about him wanting to be like a racer and everything like that. She was like, you're not designed for this. You are not designed to be a racer. Your systems are only designed to allow you to go so fast, and it's only for like short amount of time. It's not designed to go really fast for a long period of time. And she gripes at him about this and everything. And she just like claims that he's going to kill himself if he tries to race. And what we see end up happening is that there's also this local plane who's like this kind of like local war hero type plane that's, kind of this recluse. His name is Skipper Riley, or a Colonel, I think, or a Colonel, I think is one of his names, but like Skipper Riley is his name. And he's like this old, like World War II era bomber type plane, combat plane. And like, he is like this very recluse type plane, doesn't really interact with many people. Chug tries to convince Dusty to go, like, well, go and ask him if he can train you, because like, I can only do so much. I'm a fuel truck. I don't know how to fly. You at least know how to fly. I don't. He can help you with like training to become better. And, Skipper wants nothing to do with Dusty. He's like, just don't do this. Don't do this. It's not worth it type of a thing. He just like very much just wants Dusty to leave him alone. And Dusty wants to be part of this race. His dream is to be part of this race that is called Wings Around the World, or like Wings Across the Globe, something like that. And it's like this huge race between like airplanes. And they go, they have like different legs all over the world, where they go from like, point A to point B to point Z, all around the world within like a certain amount of time. And, it's like sections of a race and everything like that. And it's a way to like show off different places around the world. And, Dusty's dream is to be a part of that. And he's going to go to this qualifier that is being held at the airport in Lincoln, Nebraska. So, yeah, which is just fun. I was like, when I first saw the movie, I'm like, Lincoln, yay. I've been there. I live there. Don't know if I've ever actually been to like an airport. Probably have, just don't remember. But Dusty and Dottie and Chug go to the qualifiers, and Dusty ends up racing through the qualifiers, but he's being ridiculed because of the fact that he's like this crop duster, and nobody thinks that like, oh, he's just a crop duster. He's not really supposed to be here. He's like got illusion, dreams of grandeur and everything like that. And we're kind of introduced to another racing plane that is called Rip Slinger, who is this like, he's like designed to be like this jet plane, fast racing plane, sleek, great design and everything like that. Do like his designs. He's kind of an a-hole, a jackass. And what ends up happening is, he's like being very, mean and everything like that to Dusty, and like the guy that's like kind of like the MC of the event is, he's kind of like railing on Dusty as well. And, so it was like Dusty is very much going into this with like this, nobody thinks that he's going to do this. And what ends up happening is, it's like you have to go through the qualifying round of, the top 5 are going to be the ones that get sent to, that qualify for the finals to go into the Wings Around the Globe. And what ends up happening is, they have to go through this, like, very specific obstacle course, and, the 5 fastest are the ones that win, obviously. And Dusty, Dusty's the last one that goes through the obstacle course, and he comes in 6th by, like, I think it's, like, less than, like, a second and a half or something like that after, like, the 5th place one. And so it's just, like, he, like, outflew, like, 4 other planes. To prove that, 4 other racing planes to prove that he was here, to prove that he could at least do this. And he like kind of made everybody kind of eat their words a little bit. And, but Dusty goes home with his friends, and he's very disappointed about what happened. And he's like, just, I was this close. And of course he thinks that his, dreams of grandeur, well, not dreams of grandeur. He doesn't want to be famous. He wants to prove that you don't have to be this jet type plane to be able to do this, to be able to follow your dreams in this regards of racing. And they go back to Prop Wash Junction, and what ends up happening is, about a couple of, like, a week later or whatever it is, the MC shows up, and he's like, okay, so here's what happened. The 5th place racer actually ended up basically being, it was basically like juicing. He had like fuel in him that was like banned fuel from like this stuff because it like affects your performance. It's like, it's like basically using steroids for planes. And so he's like, so he's out, so Dusty's in. The funny part that we get out of this is that at the qualification round, Dusty had like put in like this fake name of like Jetstream or something like that. And then, like, the guy that's in charge of, like, going to find Dusty and, like, saying you qualified, is, like, can't find him, and, like, oh, yeah, no, that's me, I'm Jetstream, but it's actually pronounced, Dusty Crop Hopper instead. And it was just, like, this funny moment that we get there. And what ends up happening is Dusty ends up trying to, he's like still doing some more training. And what ends up happening is Skipper shows up, and he's like decided that he is going to like help train Dusty. And like he talks to Dusty, and he's like, he kind of tries to talk Dusty out of racing first, because he's just like, you're a crop duster. You don't know what you're getting yourself into. It's just like, you don't know how this is supposed to work. You don't know what could happen to you. And Dusty like gives him this whole thing, like basically like what I had said earlier, where it's just like, I've flown thousands of miles and I've gone nowhere. I want to at least prove that you don't have to be a racing plane to do this. That you can do this even if you're not, you can go beyond what you're designed to do. And like Skipper kind of like takes this in, and there's like lots of rumors around town about like Skipper's past, because it's like he is a war hero, but it's also like, like there's rumors of like, oh, he shot down like 50 enemy planes, and like, he flew on, dozens of missions and like all this other stuff. And he's stated to be a plane that can no longer fly. And like he has to be like pushed around the town by like his little sidekick. That is, I don't remember what the sidekick's name is, but whatever. But like he's like friends with Chug, and like they talk about fuel all the time, and it's funny. And what ends up happening is that all the way up until when it's time for Dusty to leave for the race, Skipper, Dusty, Chug, and Dottie are working on getting, Dusty much better set up in order to fly, in order to race. And like, Skipper keeps putting, Dusty through his paces again and again and again for like training him on the obstacle course that they like designed around the farms and everything, and has him, racing against like shadows of other planes and everything like that through the obstacle course. And during all this training, we actually find out that Dusty is actually afraid of heights. He's afraid of flying over 1,000 feet, which the filmmakers actually kind of justified this in the fact that there are some planes that like once they go over 1,000 feet, it's not that they can't fly, it's just that it puts a bit more strain on their systems to fly that high. And with Dusty, he's like, crop dusters don't normally go above 1,000 feet. I've driven across the state multiple times, visiting family, going on trips, what have you. And I've seen crop dusters that are out, at various points of the year, either, fertilizing the fields or, taking care of the fields and everything like that. And no, they don't usually fly that high. And, it's fun watching them, but they don't usually fly very high. So I understand that, okay, so he is actually this, he's actually scared of heights. And it's, just kind of like this funny thing of like the guy that wants to be a racer is like scared of heights. And he's like, well, I'm not going to be, it's like, yeah, I want to be a racer, but that doesn't mean that I have to always fly like over 1,000 feet in the air. And like Skipper is just like, okay, we can work around that. And like they like tune up like Dottie tunes up Dusty's engine, gets like some other new additional parts that are like, they're allowed for the race, obviously, but like, gets him a little bit more set in regards to, being able to race faster and everything. And, have his equipment a little bit better tuned for that. But he doesn't want to have his crop duster taken off, his sprayer that he uses. He doesn't want to have that taken off. And what ends up happening is, of course, now that he's qualified, he, goes to, New York, which is where the first leg of the race starts. And it's from New York to Iceland is like the first leg of the race for the Wings Across the Globe. And what ends up happening is while he's there, he ends up meeting a bunch of these other racing planes. Rip Slinger is there, who is kind of like our antagonist for the movie. And we also see Dusty interact with... so there's a British plane there that is called Bulldog, and he's voiced by John Cleese, which just already makes it funnier. And he is kind of this, a little bit, like, he's somewhat polite, but he's also a little bit stuck up because, like, Dusty's just, like, Dusty, like, knows who all of these planes are because he's been, like, following racing, plane racers for, like, a very long time. And he's, like, talking, like, complimenting Bulldog, but, like, how do you do this stuff and everything like that? And, like, Bulldog just, like, well, why would I tell you what I want to do? And, in my neck of the woods, you look out for yourself in this, in this... type of a competition, you look out for yourself. You don't want to give away your secrets. And we meet these other planes. We meet this Mexican plane who is El Chupacabra. And everybody's like, isn't that the monster that siphons gas from animals? Which is, of course, he's like, it's meant to strike fear into the hearts of my competitors. And, it's just like this, he's like this little tiny Mexican flying plane that's like based off of like a Mexican luchador wrestler, which is adorable. He even has a mask, which is funny. And like him and Dusty kind of become friends. And then, of course, we're also introduced to this Indian plane who is called Shani. And she kind of ends up being like Dusty's like love interest in the movie. Like he's kind of like smitten with her interest immediately, and she is adorable. I love her design. She's just really fun, and she's very sweet. She's very nice to Dusty. And then, of course, we're also introduced to this French-Canadian racing plane that is called Rochelle, and Chupacabra actually ends up like developing like a crush on her, which is just funny. Develops like this crush on her, And, the first leg of the race is, New York to Iceland. And, they fly off, and Dusty is the last one to arrive at Iceland. And, like, he had, like, kind of, like, freezing engine problems a little bit. Like, he built up a lot of condensation and everything like that because he was flying so low. And the next leg of the race is, during this time frame, we also see, the others are like making fun of him and everything like that. Like, we're watching as like people around the world are like watching this race. I'm like, oh, well, the crop duster, he's going to die type of thing. Like, nobody has any confidence in him. And what ends up happening is, of course, Dusty and like El-Chew, like they kind of develop a friendship. El-Chew tries to flirt with Rochelle, and it just does not work. It doesn't work. She like takes his compliments the wrong way, and it no, it doesn't go well. They just keep fighting. Shawnee is very nice to Dusty and everything, and like Dusty keeps like calling in and like double checking with like how things are going in Prop Wash Junction. And during this time frame, like Chug made like a bunch of different merchandise that he keeps selling and everything like that. And like as Dusty continues to fly, like the next leg is from Iceland to Germany. And during this leg, there's a lot more like mountain flying and everything like that. And, like Dusty gains back some space or gains back some time. But what ends up happening is that right near the end of that leg, Bulldog, the British plane, his oil tank kind of like boils over and kind of explodes and like covers his eyes so he can't see while he's flying. And like, everybody's like panicking, like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Is he going to crash? And Dusty like comes up beside him and ends up like kind of like coaching him through, like, just, fly straight, you're fine, keep going, just slower, down, we're going to hit the runway in a second, like just, helps guide Bulldog back to the runway. And, stays calm and like helps Bulldog out. And what ends up happening is like when Bulldog gets back, gets on the runway, he's like, oh, thank you. And then like, they get like the oil washed out of his eyes and he sees that it's Dusty and he's just like, why did you help me? I was so rude to you though. And I was so rude to you when we first met and everything like that. And Dusty's just like, well, I just couldn't let another plane crash. That wasn't the right thing to do. Regardless of how you treated me, that wasn't the right thing to do. And like this earns like Bulldog's respect. And, like the other planes kind of like see the way that like, Dusty had helped Bulldog. And some of them very much like that because they're just like, oh, well, that was very nice of him and everything. And unfortunately, like he still ended up coming in. I think he still ended up like coming in last on that leg as well. But he also, he helped save Bulldog. So it was just like, yeah, he came in last, but he helped save Bulldog in that regard as well. And, when they're in Germany, they end up meeting, he ends up meeting this little car who is, I think his name is called Franz. I think it's the car's name while they're in Germany. And Franz reveals that he is like this little flying car. And Dusty starts to learn that he has fans and that Franz is one of them. And he's like this little car that has like this attachment that like attaches to him. And then like, he kind of like turns into a little bit of like an airplane. And like, there's a bit of a dissociative identity disorder issue going on here because like Franz is very timid. And then like whenever he puts on like the flying thing, he becomes much more confident and like has like a different personality type of a thing. So that's just kind of funny. But like Dusty kind of starts to learn that he has like fans and that like Franz is one of them. And that like, it's like, you're kind of this representation for the underdogs, which is kind of what Dusty wanted to be anyway. Not out of like being conceited of just like, oh, well, I'll just be this representation and everything. It was just like, I just want to help inspire people that have like kind of gone through the same thing that I went through, where they don't feel like they fit into like what they were built to be. And the next leg of the race is from Germany to India. And during this time frame is when the racers all have to fly to Nepal. And during this time frame, Dusty is actually the first one to get to Nepal, which is kind of fun because Like he kind of stayed low to the ground enough while they were flying, and like he's used to like dealing with like some obstacles in his way and everything like that, and he was able to avoid them. And he ended up getting to like this, temple type looking, like Shangri-La looking place. Here's the dog, Rainy. Okay, no. And he gets to this temple place, and he thinks that, like, first he thinks that he's dead, which is just funny because it's like, he comes out of the clouds, and nope, the dog showed up. Come on, up. Hi, puppy. Come on, up. Hi. Are you gonna come say hi? Up on the bed. At least get on the bed so they can see you. Up. There we go. Up on the bed. You're silly. He's the puppy. He's the puppy. He's like, hey, shake. Why is the window not open? Oh, you're fine. And what ends up happening is, he kind of like comes out of the clouds and he sees this temple and he thinks that he's dead, which is just funny that they find out, no, you're just the first one to arrive. And like, but as the other planes show up, they're just like baffled by the fact that it's like, how were you the first one to survive? How did you do this? They're just very baffled by this. And what ends up happening is, Dusty is now in first place. And when Ishani ends up taking like Dusty out like on this like very nice romantic fly. And like they fly around India because like that's her home area, and she says, it's like, I've got like 1 billion fans and I just want to make all of them proud, and that's I want to win the race for them and everything. And she ends up making the comment to Dusty. It's just like, I noticed that you don't fly very high. And he's like, yeah, I'm kind of afraid of heights. And she's like, well, part of the section that they have to fly through next, which is going to be India, Nepal, I believe, to Shanghai, is the next section. And he ends up having there's like a huge amount of mountains that they have to like fly through or fly over. And, a skipper is like giving him advice and saying, look, you're going to have to like fly through the mountains. That's the only way. And unfortunately, you have to fly through the mountains. That's the only way that you're going to get there. And what ends up happening is Ishani says, are you going to leave or are you going to lay down in the corner now? Or are you going to go behind the bed? I mean, I don't know. I am just wander around. Sniff. Okay, make up your mind. Dog in the background. Hi, I'm cute. And he's like, I heard cute. Are you talking about me? Come to bed. I love you, dog. And what ends up happening is, Ishani says, like, well, you could always follow the train tracks instead. Because, like, you can follow the train tracks and they'll lead you through the mountains. And, that's what Dusty does. He takes that advice and, when they're racing, he follows the train tracks on the ground through the mountains. And unfortunately, going through one of the tunnels in the mountains ends up resulting in him almost getting hit by a train and almost killing him. And Dusty ends up then getting there, first. And, Rip Slinger is not happy about this at all. And then it's kind of revealed that, Dusty sees that Ishani now has this new tail wing or new tail propeller that is clearly one that is designed for like Rip Slinger's team. And he figures out that, oh, you told me that because you wanted me to get behind by following the tracks or get hurt. Because Rip Slinger told you to. Made that, gave you that in exchange. And it doesn't go well. It's, they have like this very bad fallout. And while they're in Shanghai, El Chu is still trying to like impress, Rochelle, and it's not working. And it's just funny. It just does not work well. And what ends up happening is, he tries to like serenade her with Love Machine, and it's like, this very like upbeat version, and like it doesn't work. She just like ignores him, and it's like kind of like the whole like the stereo outside the window setup, because he's like on the ground outside of like where her room is. And she just like closes the doors on him, and he like tries and it doesn't work, and Dusty just like comes in and like has it turned into like more of a slow serenade type of a thing instead, and like a softer version of like Love Machine, and like El Chu sings that, and that does get Rochelle's attention, which is just adorable, and she just like starts flirting with him then and everything like that. Just like, I'll wait for you at the finish line. He's like, no, I'll wait for you at the finish line. Well, I'll be waiting for you. It's like, it's like, yes, I really really like you, but I'm also still going to win type of a thing, which is just funny. And so he just like goes through all of that, and it's just funny to deal with. And what ends up happening is the next leg is going to be it's across the whole Pacific Ocean. So it's just like from, I think it's supposed to be from like Shanghai all the way to Mexico City is where they're going. And what ends up happening is Ripslinger actually ends up tampering with Dusty's radio. And Dusty, his antenna and his radio just get like messed up, and he ends up getting sent off course. And he ends up like getting very low on fuel, and he ends up actually getting found by these the USS Dwight D. Fleisenhauer. I just like that name. Ends up getting found by them, and like the planes that deal with planes that are from that ship there, and they get him there, and they fix his radio and everything, and like he finds out that he's like way off course, and other things, and they get him like new fuel and everything, and he ends up finding out that this is where a plane group that was called the Jolly Ranchers came from, which is a reference to it's a reference to this World War II airplane group called the Jolly Ranchers, and there were these like different ones that flew different missions. And in the movie, they have it be that Skipper was a former member of the Jolly Ranchers, and he actually has like allowed Dusty to like have like the group's emblem like on his on the plane himself. As like a representation of that, as like an honorary one. And Dusty like sees this wall full of like all these different like the Jolly Ranchers, and he looks at Skipper, and like there's only one mission and like a purple heart with the mission, and he's just like, but that can't be right. And he like calls Skipper, and he he's like, Skipper, they've got this messed up here, and like it only says you flew one mission, and like Skipper's like, I only flew one mission. And Dusty just gets like, he thinks that Skipper like lied to him about everything, and Skipper gets ready to leave the Dwight D. Fleisenhauer, and heads off. And like, first of all, there's like the whole deal with the fact he's like a non-military plane landing on the ship to begin with, and like that's just like a very interesting way of like, it's like that's landing on a moving target, which is just not an easy thing to do at very high speeds. And so there's that, and then like he has to like take off also at very high speeds, which is just also kind of funny to watch. But he's like flying his way back to he's on his way back, on his way through to fly to Mexico, where Dottie and Chug and Skipper are supposed to like fly down to like meet him in Mexico, to like help him finish off the last leg of the race. Encourage him and support him and everything. Like, it's not like they haven't been supporting him as well, but like the others have kind of like had their teams there with them for the other racers, but like Dusty hasn't. And Dusty on the way there, he ends up coming into this very bad storm, and he ends up getting wrecked and like actually falling into the ocean, and he is found and brought to Mexico. And it's funny because like the emergency section that they have for him for like where he's being like scanned and like x-rayed and everything like that is actually like, it looks like it's within like this Mexico City ruins, which I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what it looked like. And Dottie and Chug and Skipper are there, and what ends up happening is Dusty has actually taken quite a bit of damage. Like, certain parts of his wings are broken, certain other things are broken. He can barely, move on his own beyond, like, talking. And, Dottie is just like, I kind of like a little bit of like the I told you so, but like I didn't want it to be true. And what ends up happening is, Dusty and Skipper end up having this conversation where Skipper explains about what happened to him, why he lied in the first place. And Skipper explains that back during World War II, when him and his squadron were out, the Jolly Ranchers, they were out flying, he trained all of them. And they had come across what they thought was just like one enemy ship, and they were just on a patrol mission, and they were supposed to like, check and then like fly back and like report on what they found. And they end up like the rest of the squadron kind of like convinces like it's just one battleship, let's just go take care of it. And they fly in, and then they realize that it's like the whole enemy fleet that they ended up coming across, and they all get shot down, and the only one that survived was Skipper. And he's like all beat up and wrecked and everything like that, to the point where it's kind of like it doesn't look like he'll ever be able to fly again. And part of it is like it's also like this, it's like this mental thing where it's just like Skipper does not feel that he deserves to fly again, because the last time that he flew his friends, his comrades, into certain death, and he could not protect them, and he does not feel that he deserves to fly while they can't, while they're no longer around. And like he tells this to Dusty, and he's just like, and like after I was, discharged, I ended up, finding my way to Propwash Junction, and that's where I've been for the past, however many years. And Dusty is just like, wow. Which, I mean, that's actually like a typical war story, like things that happen to pilots. Like their whole squadron can get shot down, and like maybe they're the only one that survived, or only a couple of them survived. And there is this combination of like survivor's guilt that goes with it. I mean, I mentioned before that my grandfather on my mom's side was in World War II. He was in the Pacific in World War II. And he was a gunman on one of the ships, and like we have his flag. And I mean, like he didn't die there, but like he came back safely, thankfully, otherwise I wouldn't exist, because like my mom and all of her siblings were born after World War II, and I don't believe that my grandmother would have ever wanted to. Well, I don't know, maybe she still would have gotten remarried at some point, but like I don't know if it, we wouldn't have all been the same. But what happens is, he was a gunman on one of the ships, and I've seen the medals that he earned and everything like that, but it's it's like you lose people that you care about, you lose your comrades, your brothers in arms. And I come from somewhat of a military family, so I kind of understand where that comes from. I have to thank the military for my existence, because my mom and dad met in the Nebraska National Guard. So yeah, I have to thank the military for my existence. Otherwise, no Amanda. But what ends up happening is Dottie tells, Skipper and Dusty are like able to like, fix their relationship, and like Skipper's like, okay, you have to fly. And Dusty is like, I want to fly. And what ends up happening is like the rest of like the racers have like heard that like Dusty is having these issues, that Dusty is, that he had, all of this happened to him, that he, all of his, a bunch of his parts are busted and everything because he got wrecked and everything. And what happens is like, it's like El Chew shows up, and he's just like, well, I've got these, he gives Dusty like these new wings that he can use. And like, they're like racing wings. And like, Ishani or, like Rochelle gives him some other pieces, and like Bulldog shows up and like gives him a radio, and like the rest of a bunch of the other planes show up because like they've seen how Dusty flies. And like it's kind of the thing that was like, a little bit of like how, McQueen helps, helped the King back in the first, Cars movie, and like how he like supported King, the King at the end of the movie. With like, he crashed, but Lightning still wanted him to finish his race, and like all this other stuff. And so it's just like kind of references back to that, and like, this camaraderie between racers, and like, Ashani shows up and she, gives him like the Rip Slinger, propeller, that, she had removed from her, and she put her old one back on, so now Dusty can use this one, and like that helps with like fixing their relationship. And like Dottie then spends like the rest of the night or whatever, I don't know how many like days it is between like one leg of the race and the next, but like at one point earlier on, like Dusty had like removed his his spreader, his sprinkler, his sprayer, whatever one you want to call it, for the crop dusting. Like they moved that to make him a little bit more aerodynamic earlier on in the movie. And now he's getting like all these new upgrades and everything, which is still within like the rules of the race, so it's not like they're like illegal parts or anything like that. And the next, when it's time for the race to continue for the next leg, which is from Mexico City to New York to finish off the last leg, so it's like across the U.S. And what ends up happening is Rip Slinger is like, he's so angry about what's going on, because he's so annoyed about the fact that this crop duster is like showing him up. This little crop duster from like this little nowhere town is like showing him up. This like top racer that has won this thing like 3 times already. And Dusty gets like this whole new, like all these new parts and like bit of a new paint job and everything. Like he looks great. And at the when everybody takes off, it's like Dusty goes last, because like he did show up last, but technically if he'd crashed, it should have been like an out and out already, but it was revealed that there was proof of like tampering with his radio, so they allowed him to continue, but he has to like start flying like so many, like I think it's like a 10 seconds or something like that after like even the last plane goes, so it's like a severe time cramp, and he flies off, and like we get these moments where it's like we see all the planes racing and everything like that, and like they're racing through like these what basically looks like Monument Valley in Arizona, in all honesty. And that they're all the planes are racing through that and everything, and Rip Slinger and like his 2 little cohorts, like Ned and Zed or whatever, are like, oh well, let's we're gonna like sabotage Dusty or whatever to make him crash or something like that. And like once they're out of camera range, they try to like sabotage Dusty, but Skipper shows up, and he's flying now, and he helps Dusty like outfly the other 3, and Skipper kind of gets hurt at one point, and Dusty he's just like, I'll be fine, you go and you finish the race. And Dusty is flying his way through, and Dusty, it's like Rip Slinger is just like coming down the final stretch, and like it looks like he's gonna win, like he's pandering to the cameras as he's like flying in, and Dusty like does this like roll, like air roll around Rip Slinger, and like crosses the finish line first and wins. And it's just like, Springhopper wins, and it's just like everybody's so happy except for Rip Slinger, and he's just like, how did this happen? And he ends up like crashing into a bunch of like porta potties and getting like a bunch of like used oil all over him, which is just funny. So it's just like, oh, yep, you're down, bye-bye. And like the rest of the racers are all just like we see Ashani show up, we see El Chu and Rochelle show up, and we see like all these Bulldog and like all these other racers show up, and like they're all just like congratulating Dusty and everything like that. And, like Dusty's team, Dottie and Chug are there, and like Skipper flies in at the end, and everybody's all safe, and Dusty won, and everybody's happy. And what ends up happening is, Dusty's won. He's in the history books, and it's just really fun to watch that. Like we see like all around the world, like everybody's reactions to like, oh my god, this like little crop duster plane from like nowhere won this giant competition for racing, and it was awesome. And all the other racers are like so happy for Dusty and everything. And we cut to a little while later, and it's revealed that like Skipper kind of like rejoins the Navy. I'm assuming as like a flight trainer or something like that. And then Dusty is given like an honorary member of like being a Jolly Wrench. And so it's like we see the two of them, like Dusty's got like this new paint scheme, and like Skipper's kind of been like spiffed up a little bit, so he looks a little bit more spiffed up and everything, and he looks a little bit more new and shiny. And like they're on I think they're on like the Dwight D. Eisenhower battleship, and they they're all there, and they're gonna go and fly, and like we see them, they fly off the ship together and everything, and like everybody's just like happy and everything. And it's just really nice way to end the movie. It's Skipper is like, he's able to fly again. He's got his confidence back for flying. Dusty won the whole race, made friends, kind of has his little love interest with Ashani, and that's just fun. And I just really like how they did that. In regards to the cast, so Dane Cook voices Dusty Crawhopper. Stacy Keach voices Skipper Riley, and I don't know who Stacy Keach is. I'm sorry. Dane Cook I know is a comedian. We have Brad Garrett as Chug. Brad Garrett is, of course, he's the brother from Everybody Loves Raymond, and then there's like a whole bunch of other, he's been in other Disney movies. I know that he plays one of the thugs in Tangled, and he's in several other things. We have Terry Hatcher as Dottie, who's a little forklift mechanic. We have Danny Mann as Sparky, who's this other forklift that works for Skipper. Carlos Elizarque, I apologize, is El Chupacabra. We have Priyanka, I can't say her name, Priyanka Chopra as Ashani, who later on would become Priyanka Chopra Jonas when she marries, I believe she married Nick Jonas. And she's, of course, like this Indian racer, Ashani is, of course, like the Indian plane racer that's like, Dusty's love interest. We have Roger Craig Smith as Rip Slinger. Don't have a reference there. We have Gabriel Iglesias as Ned and Zed. We have John Cleese as Bulldog, the British flying plane. We have Julia Louis-Dreyfus as Rochelle, and she's, of course, from Seinfeld. And we have Cedric the Entertainer as Lead Bottom, who is like Dusty's, like, I don't know, former employer when he's not a racer. And like, so it's just like, he just lots of funny lines in the movie, which is really nice. There's not really a whole lot else. I mean, like, the movie itself was originally supposed to be about trains, and then they changed it to planes instead, and like set it in the Cars world. And then like the director of the movie, his father had actually been like a fighter pilot in World War II and had flown the type of plane, I believe, that a Skipper is supposed to be. And there's like this whole great like family backstory connection thing that they have there. Like that, like there's like a side thing, like one of the bonus features on the Blu-ray is like this, this family connection that they have to this. And it's like the director telling his sons about like stories about like, these different planes and like how it connects back to like his father, their grandfather. And like the highlight of it is that like they get to fly in like some of the planes, like the jet planes. And I would just be like, okay, I'm not the biggest fan of like planes, but I would so do that if I got the opportunity. I was like, you're gonna fly in these planes? Me? Okay, where do I sign up? I mean, like, I've been to air shows. It's like we have the airport here. I've been to air shows, watched, like I don't know if I've seen like the Blue Angels, but like, I've seen that type of stuff where it's like all these different, air performances that they do and everything, and they're just fun to watch. So that's what I have. I don't really have anything else to say here. I really like this movie. I am going to end up doing a review of Planes, Fire, and Rescue, which is the sequel to this one. I think a couple of weeks down the line, after I get like another couple of the Pixar ones done, or other general Pixar ones done. At some point when like Lightyear comes out, probably shortly after it comes out, and I've seen it like once or twice, then I'll, do a review of Lightyear when that happens as well. So that's what I have. I thank you very much for watching, and I hope that you have a nice rest of your day, and I hope that you enjoyed the video. Bye! Bye from the dog as well, who's like laying over here on the ground. Bye! Fly safe if you fly. Ah, that means a lot coming from you.
I mean, come on, you were named most aerodynamic racer in Air Sports Illustrated, and let me just say, you are so aerodynamic.